All right, it is jQuery time. So what the heck is jQuery? Why am I making you use it? Why are we going over it? What's it going to do for us? Okay, so it's a good place to start with a kind of introduction into a library that's really, really widely used over the history of JavaScript and is still really useful, especially for beginners. Some people that you might talk to if you're doing web development, if you tell them you're using jQuery, they will go, why using jQuery? That's crazy. Because it's kind of old. It's not really used by web developers anymore. Not seriously, not in like big applications. Like Facebook isn't using jQuery. Google isn't using jQuery. They're using other things that are more advanced, more modern than this. But it has been around a long time. I still use it for small little things that I make where I don't need to use a whole structured framework to build some one or two pages of some kind of site. And it's really handy for kind of getting used to JavaScript. And you're going to run into it a lot in Stack Overflow answers when you are building a simple site for your first time and you're trying to learn how to do some simple things. And it's much easier to start using jQuery than to have to dive into the complicated mess that is learning to use React or Vue or Angular or these other frameworks that maybe those words don't make any sense to you, but they're more complicated things than jQuery that are used to make whole websites. So you can make it a goal to move towards it, and probably chances are if you are moving down the web development path in 6 months or a year, you won't really use jQuery. You'll be using React or something else all the time, but I still think it's really great. And like I said, I still use it for simple things on the regular. So what's the basic idea of jQuery? Like, what's it about? Well, jQuery is around to really help management of things that are happening on the page. Okay, so what do I mean? Well, we talked about that thing called the DOM, the Document Object Model, which is this complicated term to refer to the HTML that's all here. And when we wrote our click events here, like where we're get element by ID, add event listener, click, blah, 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 that's basically manipulating the DOM. That's what it's called. Or when we say, oh, the value should be blank, we're using the JavaScript to manipulate the HTML. So jQuery does that and makes it shorter and easier to do that. Rather than having to write this whole complicated stuff every time, jQuery makes it much shorter. And then it also has a lot of little functions that are like helpful for things you might want to do. It can animate certain things. It can fade stuff in and out. There's lots of little things that it does that would be too much to go over all in detail. But it basically, all the stuff it does has to do with like messing with the HTML, moving it around, changing the values of things, emptying things, and doing stuff like that. So, okay, so we're going to start and just load this into the page and kind of see how it goes and start seeing what we can do. So in order to load it into the page at all, we have to figure out like, what do we do here? So over here, we have this button download. Now we could download jQuery and load it into our page by including the JavaScript file right alongside these files. But we're going to use a CDN, which is basically same thing that we used with Bootstrap. And there's all these different files, Okay, it says download the compressed production version jQuery. So we're just going to right click that and copy link address. And we're going to come back to our index.html. And we're going to come down to right where we load the Bootstrap. And we're going to do script src equals, and we're going to paste that in. Okay, so now we've loaded the jQuery into our page. We can see here that it says jQuery.min.js. And if we go to this, just like when we looked at that CSS, oh, we need to actually go to the whole URL. Just like when we looked at that CSS, it's going to be completely impossible to understand. It's like a huge file with crazy stuff going on because it's that minified, right? You can't just go in there and just read it easily. So, okay. Now it's loaded in our page. Okay, great. That was easy. We didn't have to do anything. Nothing changed. So what can we do? Well, there's some basic stuff that they even have as examples here that are, it has here how to add a click event. We see this $sign, and then there's some something that looks almost like CSS. Then it says on click, okay, and then there's .show, okay, so there's .html. there's these different types of like dot something functions. Now, in the actual documentation for jQuery, I find it to be pretty confusing. It's really been around for a long time. There's a ton of stuff. It's not very easy to just move around the jQuery API documentation very easily. So most of the time, it's going to be much, much easier to just like Google stuff to find it. But they do have a little learning section that has like how jQuery works, which is over here. If we just Google how jQuery works, they'll give you some pretty basic examples. They'll say, normally, if you're waiting for the page to load, you have to use this window.onload. That's built into JavaScript. But it doesn't work perfectly. There's certain situations this doesn't work. Meanwhile, there's a jQuery version where they have this $document.ready, and that is better to use because of complicated, developer reasons, right? So, okay, we have this document.ready instead of window.onload. Here, they have a click event. So we did a click event already. We had this whole, get element by ID, blah, 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 add event listener. But in jQuery, they have this thing where you can just go this, then give it an identifier, which we're going to look at in a sec, dot click, and then you have a function inside it. Okay, that's a little smaller, a little more straightforward. And then there's all kinds of other stuff. You can add classes, you can remove classes. It's not obvious to you yet why we would do this, but if you continue along, this will start being helpful, right? So imagine if you clicked on something on a page and it changed something else on the page. It changed the background color of something somewhere else. Well, that might be done by adding a class to that other element and then removing it if you clicked it off. Again, just imagining little things like this of why jQuery might be done that way. So let's try replacing one of these with a click event. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use that $, because that $, is kind of jQuery's little thing that means jQuery, actually. They register it in their script to be like a shorthand for jQuery. So we say jQuery, okay, and then we have to give it an element that we're tying it to. So here I've used the CID button, right? So that's this C button that we did back here in the index HTML. This button is called CID. Now the nice thing is we can use the same syntax that we use in CSS to refer to that element in jQuery. And that makes it really easy because we just have to know one of them. So we do this hash thing, CID button. Okay, great. And then we have a dot click. Okay. And then inside that click, we can put this function here. Okay, so we have this function that does the text input by, changes the text input to blank. So if I save this, and then we're going to reload, and we're going to see if that worked. So we're mainly looking to see if this still clears it. Okay, it still clears it. Easy. So we just made that a little bit easier to read. We just $, such and such, click, and there you go. Now we can also make this a little easier too, because there's another function that allows us to set the value of a text input. So we can change this to referring to that element, okay, the text input dot val, and then we just put blank in it. And that'll help us get rid of this piece. So now if we save and load this, let's see again if it works, 89C. Okay, cool. It's still blanking the text input. So you can see how a library here, it didn't like fundamentally change anything we're doing, but it made it a little shorter, a little easier to read, and a little easier to select things. This also means that here we were restricted to getting them only by ID, but with jQuery, we could also change this to a class. If we had the class called CID, or if we had a whole bunch of buttons, and to each of them we wanted to add a click, we could refer to them all at once with a class because we've given classes to multiple elements. Okay, so that's all a little bit abstract, a little confusing. So in the next video, we're going to actually replace all of this code with jQuery, and then we're just going to jump around a bit and look at like some other cool stuff that exists out there with jQuery. Then we're going to throw some other random libraries into the mix and see how some of the principles of jQuery apply elsewhere. So see you in the next video.